presentation for the lab school, and Mr. Mitchell, are you presenting?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm Mike Mitchell. I'm a teacher of Spanish 2, 3, and 4 in the lab school, Spanish 3B and 4 in traditional school. And I'm here tonight to talk about the iPad pilot that we did at the high school level with the lab school students. We had 9 teachers and about 30 students experimenting with the use of the iPads in our classroom. We also have 4 students here, Matt, Gabi, Sarah, and Catherine. They'll be up shortly to speak with us, and I want to thank them for coming out tonight. I also want to thank Ms. Monroe and Mr. D'Angelo and his tech team, because we really needed their help a whole lot this year as we were piloting these iPads, and they've been very supportive whenever we had questions or we couldn't figure something out. Someone was always coming to our rooms to help us, so we appreciate that. I'm here to talk about the perspective from the teacher's point of view. Instantly, when I was handed a MacBook, I realized how mobile I was. And it gave hall duty a whole new meaning, because it used to be with hall duty, I had to let a pile up of things that were non-electronic to do in the hallway, like grading papers and whatnot, and now I can do all of my work with the iPad in the hallway, and I find I'm more productive than ever. I can read email in the hallway, at home. I'm doing too much at work at home, but that makes it easier to do that. So we've just scratched the surface, and just to sum up everything we'll be talking about tonight, as the technology is improving every day, we're realizing the possibilities are endless. And even from September until now, what we thought we couldn't do, and now we know we're able to do with the iPads, it's really transformed in a positive way. So some things that we'll talk about tonight. One, I'll start with the teacher productivity and student assessment, which is what I get a kick out of the iPad for. And then over the course of the short presentation, people will talk about projects and assessments, literacy, extracurricular activities, public relations, and using the iPad for presentations. I've made use of social networking tools that are classroom safe and friendly, online quizzes, all sorts of formative assessment that give me really good instant information about what my students are learning right now. And I've always been asked to do that, but I never had really good tools to do that, because usually it's on paper, it's time consuming, and it didn't give me the information as quickly as I needed it. Edmodo, which I'm going to make bigger for you guys, is a tool that I know some teachers at the elementary, middle, and high school teachers have experimented with. It's kind of like Facebook, so the kids understand it, they relate to it. It looks like Facebook, doesn't do everything that Facebook does. But as far as pushing out polls, quizzes, surveys, giving students an opportunity to look at and respond to something, Edmodo really facilitated that for us. So for example, before coming here tonight, or as we came here tonight, I asked the students, how do you feel about presenting before the Board of Education? And the responses range from jubilant to moderately excited, I'd rather be watching American Idol, we have time, and or quaking in my boots. And Gabi, you were the one that said you were quaking in your boots. I can see Gabi's doing a little better, so I'm going to let her present tonight, okay? At first, I was going to adjust my instruction just a little bit, but we talked and we're good with it. I might do a follow-up survey at the end of the presentation to see how she feels, and I can plan for tomorrow. But you can see how I can apply that to, for example, a Spanish classroom. If I wanted to follow up with last night's homework, a lesson from yesterday, I can probably get some good information about what I should or should not be teaching today. So this has been a really useful tool, and there are a million websites and services like that. This is just one example that I thought I'd share tonight. Okay. Another neat thing that has gotten a little better with an upgrade to the iPad is Google Docs, and I'm sure many of you may have seen Google Docs. It works really well on a traditional computer, but we've managed to make it work well on the iPad as well. What we've used this for is for student collaboration. What I found really useful as a teacher is students could be working in groups, all on their own devices, collaborating or researching something and documenting their work right here on Google Docs. As a teacher, I can have tabs across my computer screen and see each group working and see their progress. I can comment, I can make instant corrections, I can give them feedback verbally, or sometimes it's fun just to type it and they get a little message that says how they're doing or what they shouldn't be doing. What you're seeing right here, I'm going to make it a little larger because it's small on the keynote, is a Google Doc that Lisette Liebold, our French teacher in the lab school, did with her French students, and she had them review the passé composé, which is one of the past tenses in French. The students went and they researched on their own where they can get resources to further their own learning. There are a ton of websites and already created resources out there The students compiled them on this Google Doc, and now the whole class has them as a review tool for the end of the year. Ms. Liebold was able to check on their progress, make corrections, offer feedback where necessary, and I think I could learn French by looking at this. Some things are a little slow. And one thing we just started working with, there's not a whole lot out there but for a high school student in Spanish class, but it's called iTunes U. And for those of you that use iPads or iPhones, it works like the Apple Store. You can purchase, for free for students, you can access pre-made lessons that college professors or high school teachers have put up there. So I thought I'd just give you an example of one that's really exciting. We need some sound.
And just stick one of these endings to the end of that verb, and it's really pretty easy to use to talk about things.
So if a student wanted further reinforcement on the conditional tense, for example, they could go to iTunes U and find more information if my lesson wasn't satisfactory. And as you can see, that gentleman was far more exciting than I am. As I said, the resources are limited. And you probably are wondering, look, no wires, right? How are we doing this? We just started using Apple TV in the classroom. I knew Apple TV as a way to stream music and videos from my iPod to my home theater system. Apple TV showed up on our school, and I wondered, what are we going to do with this? And Mr. Smith, who's here tonight, showed us, oh yeah, they showed me this really neat thing. Hold on, let me stop my presentation. So if a student's using their iPad, they just press this little blue button, and whatever's on their iPad goes right to the screen. So if a student's working on a project or collaborating or something, and I want to show the whole class what they're doing, that student can take what's on their iPad and beam it right to the screen, which saves a lot of time. They don't have to hook up wires, email me things, send me things, print things. We can just show it on screen and talk about it immediately. Speaking of which, our next presenter, Matt Viglucci, is going to show you some of the work he's been doing for research class. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Matt. One of the things I've found most useful with the iPad is doing the 20-week process, which, if you don't know, that's a research project we do in the lab school. We have to do a paper, and I've been able to do all of my research and all of my typing, my word processing on the iPad. The project also includes an oral presentation, and Mr. Mitchell has already demonstrated to you how you use the app Keynote. It's really useful. If you look here, I can have all my presenting notes on here. I've done everything for the 20-week on the iPad. I found it really useful. I haven't had to use a desktop computer in forever. But the iPad certainly isn't limited to this extra research project. We use it a lot in class too, and Gabi is going to talk to you about how we use it in English class.
One of the things I was most excited about when I heard we were getting iPads was reading books on them, and this is a book that we read during English class this year. And to do it, we used the app called Goodreader, and this app lets us not only have the books in a portable way, but it also lets us interact with them in an entirely new way as well. We can select text, highlight it, and delete the highlight if we decide we need to. We can also underline text and cross it out as we see fit. Not only can we edit the text, we can also take notes on the iPad now. This is an annotation. It's in the corner of the screen, and when you click on it, you get a post-it note style box that lets us take notes as we read. I have these annotations all throughout the PDF, and I use them as I was reading. And during class discussions, I can click on a little icon, and it shows me all of the annotations throughout my PDF. So during a class discussion, if I need to refer back to it, I can scroll through the list and click on it, and it takes me right to that page. We also used the iPads in US history, where we had our textbook on the iPad, and we can highlight and cross out and do all of the things that we could with the other book in the textbook too, which is incredibly useful for those facts. But we didn't only use the iPads for academics. The iPads have also helped us further the lab school community as a whole, and here's Sarah Fielman to talk to you more about that.
Hi, so I should mention I'm Sarah, and I'm also head of the public relations aspect of lab school, and I work with Mr. Smith and Mr. Mitchell to help put out a futures video announcement every so often. Whenever something's new and happening, we like to inform everybody. So being a part of the lab school, we're a community. So we need to keep everyone informed, the parents, the students, and even the teachers. So using iMovie and especially the iPad, I was able to collaborate with YouTube and through email, but especially iMovie, which was extremely helpful. And with the current update of iOS 5.1, I think, one of them, in iMovie we were able to now make trailers. And so I was able to revamp what I had already done in iMovie that was very basic and make it something a little bit more. So that's a little bit more interesting than what I had before, I would definitely say. But one of the things that I've been able to do is that this is available on my personal YouTube channel, but then through email and having everything just right on here, I can send it to Mr. Mitchell, who then sends it to Mr. DeVoe, and then it's up on the lab school page, which is right off of the Bethlehem homepage. So we really, in a great way, get to stay communicated, and it's wonderful. So now I'm going to talk to you about what she learned throughout this whole presentation is Catherine Seeley.
So while Sarah was using the iMovie app to make Lab School more available to public, I was able to, during this meeting, take video images and turn it into a little visual presentation starring two of our presenters tonight. So I've been able to apply this to classroom time by filming lectures and being able to edit them and go back and use them to study for tests. So that's one very helpful application.
I'm wrapping it up. I think they did a fantastic job. Let's thank the students. When we rehearsed for this, we're all thinking of different things we can bring to the presentation. At first, we decided Catherine would just videotape it, because they do that often in class, especially the way I teach Spanish. We do a lot of storytelling, we'll document it, make slideshows and things out of it. So she videotaped it, and she didn't tell us during the rehearsal that she made that trailer. And instantly we saw ourselves on TV, which was really cool. So that's all I have. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them for you.
Thank you. Any questions? Lynn, I have one for you. Can you do any of that on your iPad?
I was thinking, I think I need to take a course.
Maybe participation in government can do community service and.
I have two questions for the, if you could, it's cool what they do, but how does it make them think? I mean, this has been very critical. A lot of people are very upset that the lab school has the iPads versus the other kids. What's an argument that you're making them think anymore? I mean, they're great record-keeping tools. They can bring up stuff. I'm forced to use a computer in my office now as a physician. It does not make me a better doctor at all. And every doctor I talk to says the same thing. They're great for record keeping, but we already know the knowledge, and we're using it. We're using it as record keepers. And the presentations were nice. The students spoke. I was more impressed with how they spoke, honestly, than what they put up there. But one, how is it making them think better? And two, as a Spanish teacher, when I went to college, I learned the Racius method in college, which was constant talk, bang, bang, bang. The idea was not to think. It was to become a knee-jerk that you knew what to say, you didn't even think. And obviously, as a Spanish teacher, there's more to learning Spanish than learning how you break down past tense and future tense. To me, that doesn't seem like something you would do. It's talking. It's hearing the language. It's knowing how to respond to the language. Yes, you have to get the basics, but by high school, I would hope that they're learning to speak. And going out to the computer, other than hearing it when someone's speaking, I don't see, honestly, the purpose. I don't. And I'd like to know why, if we were to buy computers for everybody, which is not on the table, but if we were, what's the argument that it's better?
I can give my take on it, and I'd be happy to have Ms. Monroe, Mr. D'Angelo, or Mr. Smith chime in, or the students. One thing that I left out is that the students have constant access to the internet. And one thing we've been doing in my class in particular is I can present a problem to them that can be solved. And we have the tools right at our fingertips to solve the problem. So for example, in the Level 4 Lab School Spanish class, they are broken into different groups where they had to take a real-life issue in Spanish and research it. Now, some of the research was in English to get some basic information. Some was in Spanish, but the presentation will be in Spanish. And what I'm trying to get them to do is not rely on a script, not rely on too many notes, and that's something that we do in the lab school with our research process, where they can refer to limited information and come and look at us and talk to us. So just today, actually, my students had to present just one slide of the keynote presentation on what they're researching so far, and with those limited notes, they had to present to us rather spontaneously what they researched. And then to continue the speaking, the real spontaneous part was we, the audience, asked them questions, and they were graded on their ability to respond to it. So not all of it's on the iPad. What I would argue is that it's a paperless tool. Everything's at their fingertips. Many teachers are constantly trying to get this room rented out so we can use those tools or the cart of laptops that we have available. But in this particular class, we can really stay in our class the whole period and have everything to us. Ms. Liebold and I have subscribed to something called comprehensible input, where the student should have access to hearing Spanish and French on a regular basis from us, right? But not being a native speaker, there's so much out there the students can watch and listen to. And there's a lot of video and audio resources that are becoming more available to us that they could actually, with a set of headphones, be listening to authentic speakers. Unfortunately, given the technology is so new, as a language teacher, sometimes I feel left out. Like I've often asked at the trainings, like, what about me? There's a lot of good stuff out there for social studies, math, English. But what we're finding is as these become more abundant and more popular is that people are putting more stuff out there for us to use that are iPad friendly. So I see your point, but I'd like if anyone else wants to chime in.
I mean, I can certainly comment. I think that one of the, I guess, maybe concerns about technology in schools is that we expect it to replace instruction, or we expect it to replace something. And I see, quite honestly, in a few years, I see this being something that all the kids have. And I don't mean we're buying it or they're bringing in, but some form of tablet. I think all of the textbooks will be online. We already know all of the new assessments will be online at middle and high school kids, really kids from 3rd grade up. I think what they lend themselves to is they allow for more creativity. than anything, and that is a huge skill. You mentioned the kids speaking, being creative. In most businesses today where you're doing a presentation, you have to have something visual for people to see. You know, the days of kids standing up with note cards and reading from them are gone, or should be gone. So I see these kind of devices to enhance classroom instruction, to allow kids to be more creative, to provide what Mr. Mitchell said, kind of instant information, the whole concept of podcast and things. Perhaps if you look at it, let's say students listen to a lecture a teacher would maybe give in class through a podcast the night before for homework, they can then have a more in-depth discussion the following day in class and avoid having to take notes or listen to a teacher lecturing, and instead have more of a conversation about what's really happening regarding this unit. So those are the advantages. I think the reality is you still have to have a good teacher, no matter whether you have paper and pencil or whether you have iPads. And that's where the lab school, I think, has made, they have good teachers who are willing to try new things, and that, I think, is what you need. These are never going to replace good instruction.
I can just comment. Mike and I think it was last fall, went into the lab school to observe some classes, and I'm very skeptical. I'm not very tech savvy, and I'm skeptical. And I was going to say, okay, what's going to happen with these iPads? And I think we were either in history. It seemed like they were talking about economics. It may have been history class. And the kids were broken up into small groups. They all had their iPads. One kid was, one student was surveying and kind of calculating the survey results as she was doing it. Kids were writing parts together, maybe it was the Google Docs, sharing things, all discussing and talking, because I thought they'd all be doing this, but they weren't, and interacting. And I think that the task was they had to come up with a tax code for Bethlehem. And I remember, I kind of was listening in, and what they were talking about, like a 30% tax rate for people making $50,000 or more. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay. So I asked them to look up, someone with the iPad, only one woman, I said, look up the median, mean, and the income of Bethlehem, and then see if that affects your discussion. And she had it within 30 seconds. She had it, and she reported back to her group, oh, this is what our community makes, and this is what would be the impact of our proposed tax code on our own families. And then they went off on the discussion with theirs. So I was amazed at how quickly I said, okay, here's my question to you, because this isn't making sense to me. Here's your question, get the data, and then they went right back into the discussion. So I didn't, at least for that particular class, I didn't see it replace instruction or student interaction, but it was really enhancing it for that one lesson that we saw. I don't know, Mike, if you had any.
Yeah, I was going to make the same point that in the social studies class we saw, what it was doing was enabling the students to do their research right in the classroom rather than have to walk down to the library and look things up. They were able to take their iPad and figure out what pieces of information they needed. I think they were developing their platform as a presidential candidate in what we saw. And I also sat in one of Mr. Mitchell's classes, and what I found fascinating was he was working with the whole class, but it was a very individualized experience for the kids. So the kids who were getting something quick could move on and do other work. The ones who were struggling with something, Mr. Mitchell knew who they were and was able to go over and help them. And what he was saying about being able to hear native speakers, they were able to do that in the class I saw, so that they could hear a conversation by people in Spain rather than hear our flat American accents trying to make it sound like Spanish. So I found it fascinating how both the instructors and the students are able to adapt the technology to their own needs.
And my daughter's in a middle school Spanish class. Great. Is it Mrs. Scott? Is that the Spanish teacher in the middle school?
Mr.
Scott.
Mr. Scott.
Yeah, Mr. Scott, right. Oh, and he uses a lot of technology, and we don't use a lot of technology in my house. But I'll tell you, because learning is so fun for these kids, when I compare my son's experience with my daughter's experience, they're just singing away, and we're using YouTube videos, and they're funny. But my daughter is actually learning Spanish in a different way than my son did, and it just, at least for her, it's working. I don't know, it would say it would work for every kid, but they just have, because it's so fun, and they're hearing native speakers, and they're hearing it in song, and she's picking it up, I believe, quite well. So.
I just want to add a couple of comments. We all touched upon some of the important aspects of mobile learning and personalized instruction. I think for me, it's the fact that it changes the paradigm in the classroom from being teacher-centered to student-centered, taking ownership of their own learning. And those are lifelong skills that they need to develop. The other thing about engagement, which adds to comprehension and retention, as well as the fact that for many of them, it adds relevance to the material that they're doing. So it's a tool that needs to be put into perspective, but it's one tool that becomes, offers limitless potential for the students to explore. And I think, Mr. Cooper hit upon the fact that I might be thinking something and need a quick refresher of what that is. I'm on the internet, and then the beauty of that is, if I'm thinking that questions, most likely some of my colleagues or classmates are, so I then can collaborate with them. And we bring the collective knowledge of the entire group together, and certainly the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. And I think it's got limitless potential, but I think you're right, it's a tool. It needs to be put into context and into perspective. And we've only scratched the surface. When you consider the fact that, for all intents and purposes, they started this past September, and we have some technology. We're still learning how the technology fits in the classroom. It's remarkable. You saw the presentations the middle school teachers made a month ago, and now what's happening at the lab school. And just to follow up, a final comment, what Jody said is, we don't necessarily envision, because the technology has become less expensive, that this is a way that bring your own device can actually be leveraged within the context of the community, where no longer the school district itself has to bear the burden of purchasing the asset itself.
And Sarah actually wanted to comment. She almost didn't get an iPad this year because last year her research paper was why we shouldn't have technology in schools, and I was one of the evaluaters. So I know I'm not going to let it go until you graduate.
Well, I'm glad I got one. It's very fun to use. And I think just kind of could have asked for a better segue on that was just that from the student's point of view, we've kind of grown up with this stuff, and we've been on the computers, and we've been learning through YouTube and finding fun different ways to present materials to our classmates, and it's just something we've kind of grown up with. So instead of having a teacher say lecture you on Spanish just in a college lecture hall, it's kind of become a way that we think we go to the internet and we go find our own way that works specifically for us. And I think that's what really helps us. We've grown up with it, so it's a really helpful tool for schools.
You can keep it till June.
I'm not anti-technology. I just think there's fields that it shouldn't take over. It should never replace a physician. It should never replace a teacher. I think the lab school is most equipped to do it because your fundamental goal is research and public speaking. It's how I view it. And you guys are growing up on that. But the bulk of kids that I deal with cannot speak publicly at all, cannot address adults properly, cannot write properly. You guys are getting that ingrained into you, but the general population is not. So if you get that, where they become computer dependent, I guess, I'm real worried about their speaking and research abilities. That's my take on it. And it's a lot of money to be lacking in public speaking and research skills.
I'm Steve Smith. I'm the coordinator last year. First of all, I came from tennis. The final thing I'd like to just add, and this is my 16th year as a teacher in the classroom. The first year we're using something like the iPad. And I think we want to pay attention to the fact that this is an opportunity. We're hearing from every child. I have 30 kids in some of my classes. We use a program like at BOE that Michael showed earlier, and I can start the class with a discussion question about why did Golden Caulfield do this. And just like a Facebook wall kids have, they're all commenting. So I can make sure that all 30 kids, in a 45-minute period, it's almost nearly impossible to hear from all 30, or some of them are really shy or reticent and don't want to share out loud. And now we're encouraging them, they're getting feedback. And then I've actually seen a student who's typed something one day, a few days later in class discussion, the hand's going up, and now they're feeling a little more emboldened because they got positive feedback. So So it has allowed, and you just saw the technology, they each have one. They're all doing their own presentations, they're all using them. So it's allowed us to really get every kid engaged. And that's a challenge. And I've been happy to see that at this point. And like Sal said, less than a year into this program. And I think part of the reason that Lab School was chosen is so now we're going to have these same groups of kids next year and we can see, okay, so 1 year was great, what's going to happen after 2 years? But thank you for your time.
Laura?
I have some more practical kind of questions on this. I forget which student, but one of you presented the literature and the textbook. And this may be a Jody question, but did we have to purchase the books to be put on the iPad that we already had the books so that or how are they getting those on the iPads? And
well, a lot of literature is free, depending on, especially a lot
legally.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I have no
Say that louder, please.
Yeah.
Or there is a site where I'm able, like every classic, I just they are.
Yeah,
Right, there's tons of them that are available for free. And you download it to a Reader or iBook, and then the students can do what Gabi showed. You start annotating.
Yeah. And I mean, we just used to use the little tab notes.
Yeah.
Right. When she's putting them in it. Yeah.
Right. In textbooks, we have, if we have purchased, right, some of the more recent textbooks have online availability when you purchase the textbook.
Oh.
Apple is really working on something to get more textbooks available online. A lot of the textbook companies have not been obviously all that gung-ho about giving up their paper editions, so they often will make you purchase the paper in order to get the actual online component. So that's pretty much, but moving forward, my expectation, or what I think will definitely happen shortly, is that schools will be purchasing many textbooks in an online capacity. There's a program right now we're looking at called Overdrive, which the public library has. It's now available to schools, which allows you to sign out a book online. So we're working to bring that in over the course of it for next year as well. So there's a lot of resources. There's a lot of free resources, and some, of course, would have a cost.
And I think in higher ed, that's more, because I have a book coming out in July, and it's going simultaneous release, paper and electronic copy.
Do you have to buy it electronically?
Well, you have to purchase one or the other.
Right. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
If we're purchasing those for the iPad, but we already have the paper ones
Well, right, but it sounds like the classics are available, but for
I'm
for
talking
newly
the
published
textbooks.
Right, newly published books will oftentimes release.
No, I know.
Two forms, you buy one.
The other questions I have are you kids able, obviously you're taking these home at night. Do you use your own personal emails and Facebook and everything else? I know you have strict policies on all this, but I'm just kind of wondering how much are they becoming their personal computers, and is there any concern or issues with that? Have you had issues with kids misusing them in different ways? Or
When they're in the school, it's on the school system, so
right.
everything's blocked. We came to this agreement as a committee last year when we started this, that I guess some of the research Jody and Sal had done ahead of time showed that when you give them to a student and everything's blocked here and outside, they kind of stop using it.
Right.
So there has been some trust in that they're going to go to safe sites, and that we really haven't seen a problem.
You haven't seen any problems?
Not in that regard. We've had definitely some damage issues with something that's all glass, and a teenager, you're bound to have some breakage and some.
I'll tell you, all glass and an adult sometimes too. So
there has been some loss and damage, but not. That was not an issue we've had.
And what's going to happen, June 22nd or whatever? I mean, they're all going to hand them in. They're going to stay here over the summer.
Yes, that is the plan.
Gabi has potential.
I know that I work on homework assignments a lot on the iPad in school, and so when I go home, I'll continue to work on those assignments. But if I have something personal that I need to do, I will switch over to my laptop, and so I do go to the iPad for something. But I do use it even at home for aspects.
yeah, one of the things that under acceptable use policy, no matter what, it is still school property. So the students, although there's that trust factor, the students also have to be heavily explained that anything they do on that is subject to school rules and subject to school purview. So it's a trust issue, but it's also no different than an employee-employer relationship and so forth. And we're dealing with excellent students that basically, as long as they understand that, respect that, they're really usually is no problem. But if there is, then I'm sure the wonderful tech department and Mr. Smith will take care of it first.
Well, and I know that, Sal, you and I have talked before about not lab school kids, but other kids, when they're doing work in school and then they go home and they can't get it anymore, whereas they used to be able to access it from home and all. And so do the iPads have the same problem since they're on one network here and then when they go home they're on their own network? How do they, and can't that work then for the other kids as well?
Students cannot get to their network folder that resides
Right.
here in the district. But
Right.
what these students are starting to use and where the trend is going is to everything being in the cloud. So
Right.
when you heard them refer to Google Docs, their documents are out in the cloud.
To the cloud.
And as we move forward, that's the paradigm that we will see used, whether it's Google Docs, whether it's Dropbox, whether
Right.
it's Windows version of that. That's eventually, we'll probably migrate away from our own storage and that everything will be stored in the
So
cloud.
are the kids not in lab school being encouraged to use Dropbox and cloud and all those too, or not?
We're moving in that direction. At the middle school, we just are working with the administration there to have a protected Google Apps environment where now all middle school students are going to have access to internal communications or email through Gmail, and with that comes access to their documents and spreadsheets that comes with Google Apps. At the high school, it varies based on program. I don't want to mislead you in thinking that it's any further along at the high school than the preliminary stages.
Because I think that's really important. I
It
mean,
is.
I think, that's a shame if the kids are working on something in school and then they go home and they can't get to it or want to redo it or, anything like that. That's really frustrating for the kids.
Equally as frustrating for the teachers as well, who have stuff that they want to go
Oh,
between
true.
environments as well.
Because it really does encourage learning as needed, when needed,
Well, it's
instead of
separating.
just in the classroom.
Well, that's what it's separating the classroom learning from the home learning, and it doesn't help, when the kids, when you think about things at home, you come up with different ideas, and maybe you want to revise something you were working on in school, but you can't get there.
And we still have some obstacles to work through in that regard.
But that's easier, I assume, than with the iPad.
I would imagine if I asked these students whether they use their network folder anymore or not to store documents within school, the answer to that is no.
So what are you guys using? Are you using the cloud?
Well, one thing that we did try to get almost the whole year, we finally got this spring, was our school email addresses. That was provided with fielded.sarah@publicschool.org, which was really helpful because Mr. Mitchell can send us things for things to work on or links to Google Docs or all these other things that we would be able to reach on our iPad, but we never were doing it before because we couldn't get emails or other things like that in school, and some kids might not have a Dropbox or other things like that. So the emails were really helpful, and we use them almost every day. Sorry.
No. I was going to say what we were able to do with Google Apps is we were able to restrict the students to send to each other or to send only to the BCSD narrative.org domain so the teachers could exchange information with them.
But so then you're just doing it in Word docs as attachments, and then the kids open them up at home, revise them, and send them back, kind of thing?
As another alternative.
And then also Edmodo, which I know Mr. Mitchell showed you, and the Passe Composé, which we did in French class. There was a link to that Google Doc in Edmodo, which you can get to from both school and home. So that was one way. And then also, I found that Dropbox was really helpful. We had a video assignment for U.S. History Tuesday, and I had it on the flashlight, but I also put it in my Dropbox so that I could have it there.
Lynn had a question?
It's not really a question, just a comment. I was thinking back 20 years ago in former lab school, under probably difficult conditions at the time because it really was introducing 21st century concepts before anybody was talking about 21st century skills. And the whole idea of collaborating, working together and project-based learning, was so new then. And when Kate asked that question, I was thinking about it. That the thought processes that went into that at that point, I can just remember how impressed I was with the 20 and the 40-week reports, those initial ones, those first years, and the main thing was the fact that they could speak, make presentations. Now students didn't have the tools. I mean, you had to come to the library and do the research. I mean, a lot has changed in 20 years. And I just see like the iPads as just another step in that
moving forward, just to, as a tool to help improve those skills of working together and collaborating and being more creative in what you're doing. So that's how I view it. The thought processes are still there and being encouraged, by the staff.
Yeah, you'd be hard pressed to find a college campus today where, I mean, there's some schools that require you to come with an iPad or a laptop. So, I mean, we almost need to miss not exposing students technology to show them that possibilities of using it.
Anyone else?
I just have to ask the board really and the administration to kind of celebrate the fact that you've been open-minded enough to consider this as an option. Last week I was at a regional meeting at BOCES of my counterparts, and the spectrum or the continuum goes from everything from prohibition of personal electronics in the educational environment to no live Bethlehem. We are looked upon locally as kind of the cutting edge, and they're looking at us, ooh, they're trying that? Oh, because philosophically we believe on giving and empowering our students to the best extent possible, and not presupposing that it's all going to be on the downside. As Dr. Douglas said, we've got policies in place, we have technology in place to monitor and to assess, and when there's going to be an issue and a privilege is abused, we'll deal with it administratively. But we don't come into it saying there's a prohibition and we don't recognize the value that the personal learning devices can empower our students with. So you really, I don't know if you realize that from a capital region standpoint, we probably are one of the most progressive districts in this area of mobile device and personalized learning. So.
Great. Anyone else?
Well, thank you, Sal, because I think you've helped us get there. So.
Did anybody in the community have a question for any of the lab school students or Mr. Mitchell? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice presentation.